Professor Pete here. This week one of game design, and we're going to talk about board game design specifically. But before we get there, we need to get some keywords out of the way. So let's just jump right to it. Game mechanics, super important. It's the aspect of game design, the rules in which the player follows within the game world. Gameplay is what actually takes place when the player plays the game. Missions are the game mechanics. Completing and engaging with that mission is the gameplay. So this is really important, understanding the game mechanics, why a game is a game, the rules of that game, and then the gameplay is how the game is played itself. We see a lot of gameplay on YouTube. For example, for us specifically, what we're doing is we're creating levels. It's the game's location, the game's world in which the player is situated. So again, you can think of lots of different places where you've been to, and you can make that into a game. In terms of gamification, I think this is also a very important phrase that we hear a lot of, and it's the idea, the application of game assets or game design elements in game principles and non-game contexts. It can also be defined as a set of activities or processes to solve problems by using or applying the characteristics of game elements. Pretty interesting. So basically gamifying, let's say a lecture or something you're doing, tying your shoelaces, you can gamify that. Whoever ties their shoelaces in the least amount of loops, is the winner. Whoever does it the fastest is the winner. Whoever does it the slowest is the winner. You're gamifying things. So this is another thing that you can think about in your everyday life, is how we can think about games, not only in the sense of playing video games on your mobile phone or some sort of console, everyday life. Another really important thing, and by the way, that's the URL where I got a lot of this information as well as Wikipedia, but the other thing too is to think about intermittent rewards, why a game is fun. So when you're playing a game, think about, well, wow, this game is really fun, and it probably has to do with this idea of intermittent rewards. So you don't win every time or win the same amount when you're using a slot machine. This wouldn't be as exciting or fun, right? So the enforcement of intermittence causes a positive and euphoria response in the brain. And sometimes causes the idea of an addiction. So basically you're giving rewards sometimes, different times, but you're not giving it all at once. So you're giving it slowly over time. Eventually, if that person keeps playing that game, they get more and more advanced, your player levels up. This is the idea of intermittent rewards. In terms of game design, let's have a look at some levels first. I thought it'd be really helpful for us to look at Mario Brothers. It's a really old game. I played it a lot, so I can just go look at this and say, yes, I totally understand. This is the level design, the map. So we're basically taking the side-scrolling game that we all know, and now we're visualizing it in the sense of how the levels are set up. We can apply the same concepts to board games. So we have a path. This is very important, one of the major characteristics. We have a path in which the player goes through the journey. And so you can see there's multiple paths in this instance to get to the final point. So in some ways, you can think of it as a maze if you have multiple points of diversion. The thing that we want to look at in terms of the design, in terms of what makes game design really successful with not only games itself, but board games. If we look at it, we have interesting and relatable characters. We have attractive visuals. We have a solid story. Here's an old game I used to play. It's called Snakes and Ladders. So you would roll the dice. You'd maybe roll a 3. In this case, you roll a 3 and jackpot. You go all the way up to 51 because that's where the ladder is. If you roll the dice, and eventually you get to 25, you slide back down to 5. You got to go do it all over again. But if you got 1, you go back to 6. 6 takes you to 27. You've already bypassed 25. So this is what I think is also cool with board games in this sense, is the game mechanics. You have these snakes and ladders. You hit a cube, a number that has a ladder, you go up. You hit a snake, you go down. Pretty interesting. In terms of the design itself, I wouldn't say these snakes are aesthetically pleasing. I think they can improve that a lot, maybe making the eyes bigger, making the head bigger, playing with proportions for the character. Again, this is ideas that I teach in animation too, but nonetheless, that comes up. Colors of the cubes, again, I don't know if I really find those to be overly exciting. As we talk about games, all right, in terms of game design, what makes a game really fun? We talked about relatable characters, attractive visuals. This pertains mostly to 3D games. A solid story, challenging gameplay, If it's too easy, it's not fun. If it's too hard, it's not fun. The music soundtrack, also very important. Intuitive controls, make sure the controls of the game are easy to use. These things don't really apply to the board game, but it's worth talking about. And then you've got depth and immersion. How deep is this game? Monopoly, one of those games that's very deep. It runs in a circular fashion. You keep rolling through as you roll the dice, you move along. The game hasn't changed much. In terms of the game itself, you look at it, it's pretty simple. The character design, A+. In terms of the design of the boxes, not so much, but still it gets the point across. You have the icon for railway car. You have the very simple design of the waterworks and the electric company. And you have the jail also there. And that works okay. So in some ways you could say the eye-catching colors, yes and no. You got that very, very muted green, gray as the base. But in terms of game mechanics, I think this is pretty exciting. Hard to explain in under 4 minutes, but we've all played this game, so we understand how it works. Moving along, this is a game I played as a child. It's called Candyland. And in terms of the world, the land that we're in, it's very interesting. We have 4 cute little kids starting off, and you roll the dice, hit the number, hit the color. Sometimes you hit a color that has a bridge, so you have this rainbow trail bounce around. You don't have to go through this whole loop. But you go through the colors and then you get to the very end. So it's a very straightforward game, but really in terms of the visual presence of this game, it's very interesting. And because it's Candyland, you have all sorts of embellishments that are generally candy. This is another game, board game design I thought was pretty interesting. Zoom in a little bit there, but you can see there's not a lot of numbers here. That's one of my things that I don't find to be so interesting. And then you've got a very short number of cubes to get to the final point. What's kind of interesting with this is the curved design, where we saw Monopoly was in a square, but still a circle in a loop. And with this one, you've got, again, very playful, kind of like Candyland, but less stylized in the curve, unique use of colors and motifs. In terms of this world, I would say it's just nature, where you have flowers and you have the sun and you have stars. And then finally we have this design, which is a little bit more illustrative. Again, it's not a lot of cubes. I wonder how fun this game would actually be. There's no numbers, there's no colors, but nonetheless I thought the design of it was pretty interesting. There's a lot of work here. Aesthetically very pleasing to the eye, beginning the trail and the end of the trail, and all the different motifs and designs to get there. So I wanted to share with you some different board game designs. What's a successful one? You can see here there's different worlds, different colors, different characters, different motifs, and that draw the appeal of this game that people want to play. So again, not only is the game mechanics got to be kind of interesting, as you saw, there's different loops and ladders and snakes that we could do, different pathways with Mario Brothers, but also we can think about, after the aesthetic, maybe there's a narrative behind this. Maybe the character looks like this and has to go here. Maybe, I don't know. You'll come up with all sorts of designs and ideas that could be really, really interesting and visually to see in terms of board game. Again, there's other mention of maybe taking a game that you already play and putting it into a board game. So Zelda, for example, you can think about how would you take Zelda, the game that you play on the console, and then put it into a board game. Think about Pokemon as well. How could you change that? And maybe you want to do it that way. That's fine if you can't come up with an original idea. But again, I prefer original idea. But if you decide to do, maybe a classic game that you used to play as a kid and then convert it into a board game, it can be very unique and interesting, aesthetically pleasing and understandable at the same time. You never know. So that's all I got. Professor Pete, I'm out. Just remember, keep learning.